Alrighty, how are we doing this morning? Are we waking up? Trying? How long have you been here now? About 3 days? Are you guys sleeping well? No? Do you have actual beds? Bunks? Alright. Yeah, I think I'm still recovering. I got back home to LA from Berkeley. I was up at Berkeley all last week with a group of students, got back on Saturday. And I think I'm still recovering from sleeping on a thin pad all week long. My neck is all kinked and everything. But so I feel like I can kind of relate to where you guys are at right now, halfway through the week, trying to relax. But welcome. My name is Ryan Pauly. We are going to be talking about how relativism is undermining our students' faith in Christ. And like I said, last week I was up at Berkeley with a group of students, and we were doing apologetics and worldview training. And 3 different days, we took them onto Berkeley campus where they could get into conversations with Berkeley students after doing a lot of training. And so we put them in front of these kind of people to have these sort of conversations. And what is interesting is a couple things. One, how many students at the university at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, hold to relativism. Hold to this idea that there is this no objective truth, at least when it comes to morality. You know, morality, it's true for you, but it's not true for me. You know, we can kind of do what we want. Who are you to say someone else is true? And this is the kind of attitude that we got from almost every student at UC Berkeley, which is interesting that here's one of the top universities, at least in the state of California, if not the country, where these students are paying a ton of money to go learn something, and then they're learning that all truth is this relative. They just have their own truth. In fact, at one point during the week, I walked into one of the buildings, and I was looking through the classrooms. I walked in, I poked my head. There's a class just about to start, 500-person seat, lecture hall. And I go back outside the classroom, and there's this bulletin board. And I begin to look at this bulletin board, and most of the things pinned up on this bulletin board were saying, hey, we're doing such and such research. We'll pay you $5 if you come down and let us, test some stuff or whatever. And they're trying to get people to do some research with. But there's another thing that kind of caught my attention, and it was this poster. It says, the Voice and Spirituality Experience. And this was going to be going on during the month of July. It was an intensive held at Berkeley, costing $495. As I began to read, what is this Voice and Spirituality Experience? What do those have to go together? The bottom part stuck out to me. An in-depth inquiry into the relationship of our spiritual awareness to our voices. Solid vocal techniques to free the natural voice, combined with gentle spiritual exercises, empower you to speak your truth and sing fearlessly. Does anything stand out to you here? Yeah, that's what immediately caught my attention. To speak your truth. Right, here's even a vocal exercise clinic that people are paying to learn how to free their natural voice. And okay, that's a good thing. Let's learn how to free our voice. But then also teaching, as kind of a subset to this vocal lessons, how to speak their own truth. This idea that the truth is just inside of you. Learn to speak your truth, and then you can't condemn someone else for speaking their truth. And so here's something that's even interwoven at Berkeley's campus into voice lessons. And so we kind of have this idea that we have students kind of asking this question, okay, then what is truth? Now, how many of you have looked at this kind of question of what is truth? What are different kinds of truth? When we talk about relative, objective truth, anybody? A couple of us? Okay, this is something our students are dealing with. And so I think it's important to go over a quick introduction. So the first kind of truth that we have is subjective truth or relative truth. This is truth based on your preference, based on your belief. This is something that's true for each person. When you think of this, think of ice cream. Right, we have lots of flavors of ice cream down there, flavors of shakes. The best shake is the cappuccino chip shake. Right? That is the best. And if you disagree, you're wrong. Well, no, you're not wrong. Well, why not? Because that's just my opinion. Right? And so we have this idea called subjective truth, where it's just truth based on my opinion, based on my beliefs. Now, to counter that, we then have objective truth, which is kind of like medicine. When you go to the doctor and you fall, you break your arm, the bone is like sticking out of the skin. You go in there, they take x-rays, they're like, your arm's broken. No one says to the doctor, that's just your opinion. No, because we recognize when there's something wrong with you, when your bone is broken, it's broken whether you believe it or not. Later today, I'll be talking with the students about how Jesus is the only way, and I'm going to use an example talking about when I had appendicitis. That I thought there was something wrong with me, and I was wrong because my belief didn't match reality. The doctors thought it was just a stomach ache, but they were wrong because it wasn't just a stomach ache. When they found out it was appendicitis, they had to do surgery and take out my appendix, right? But just because I believed it was something else didn't make it not my appendix. And if I ignore it, it's going to make it worse, right? If I ignore the broken arm and say, I don't think my arm is broken, it's not going to get better. It's not going to go away. There's still going to be that problem. So students have to understand that there's this difference between subjective and objective truth. And what we're seeing in our culture today, in this culture of relativism, is this idea that all truth is relative. Maybe they hold to like scientific and mathematic truth as objective, but at least when it comes to religious truth, that's relative. That's just your belief. You just believe that Jesus is the only way. He's not really. And so this is something our students are having to deal with. And so they come up to these campuses and they have these things that say, people say, but there is no truth. What's the problem with this statement? It's clearly this is true, right? If you ask the question, well, is that true? Is it true that there is no truth? Right? Because if it's true there is no truth, then there is truth. And if it's not true that there is no truth, then there is truth. This is a statement we call self-refuting. Helping students understand that these kind of statements are self-refuting. They cannot be true. They contradict themselves. Another statement like this, they might say, well, but there is no religious truth. Well, is that a religious truth? You're trying to make a true statement about a religion, and so that has to be true in order for there not to be religious truth, which means that there is religious truth. And so these are kind of the statements that we're finding and how these things contradict. And so what we have to understand is this idea of relativism and how it is influencing our students. Another part of relativism is called deconstructionism. Deconstructionism states that the reader's interpretation is more important than the author's intent. That when you read something, what do you get out of it? What do you think it means, rather than what did the author actually intend for it to mean? Right? This, again, is taught so much because they say, well, each person has their own experiences. Each person has their own kind of cultural ways of interpreting things, and so you just interpret it based on your culture, based on your experience, and you get your own truth out of what it says. Now, I think that this is an idea of postmodernism and relativism that has influenced and impacted the church maybe in ways that we haven't seen before. Have you ever been in a Bible study where someone reads a passage of Scripture and then they ask the question, well, what does this mean to you? Now, sometimes they might say that of how does this apply to your life? How can we apply this? But a lot of times that I hear this said is, what does this mean to me? What is my meaning? What is my interpretation of this verse? What do I get out of it? What is this just saying to me? Rather than, what is God trying to tell us? The author of Scripture, God, what is his message? What is he trying to tell us? And how do we better understand what God said so that then I can apply it to my life and I can learn from it? And I find so many times with students, when they're looking at Scripture, they even say things like this. Now, what can I get out of this? What does this mean to me? How can I kind of reinterpret this verse to kind of apply to my life rather than truly trying to understand what is God trying to tell us through this? So here's a couple kind of things and ways that I think relativism has impacted us and started to influence our culture. Now, the second thing I think that we have to help our students understand when looking at this cultural idea of truth is the law of non-contradiction. How many of you have ever studied or looked at the law of non-contradiction, know what it is? Okay, just a couple. The law of non-contradiction says that opposite ideas cannot both be true in the same sense and in the same way. Right, so the technical way of saying it is just A is A and A is B and A is not B are mutually exclusive. They both cannot be true in the same way. A practical way of putting this is saying, okay, the earth is round and the earth is not round, cannot both be true in the same way and in the same sense. Right? You can't have a round earth and a not round earth existing at the same time. This is kind of something that is the foundation of our language that helps us even just to get along. Now, the law of non-contradiction doesn't help us know what's true. Instead, it helps us know that when we know what's true, it helps us discover then what is false. Anything that contradicts the truth is therefore false. If we know that the earth is round, then to say it's a triangle is false, to say it's a square is false, to say it is not round is false. But if the earth is not round, to say it is round is also false. Right? So anything that contradicts what is true, they cannot both be true in the same sense and in the same way. This is something that this idea of religious pluralism, part of relativism in our culture, completely goes against. Because in Christianity, we have truth statements. And this is being undermined by our students when we say things like Jesus is God and someone comes and says Jesus is not God. Can both of these statements be true in the same way and in the same sense? No. Either Jesus is God, meaning the statement he's not God is false, or Jesus is not God, meaning the statement he is God is false. But we live in a culture where you go to campuses like UC Berkeley, where they say, well, whatever you want to believe is true for you. I had a student once tell me, you believe God does exist, therefore he does. I believe he doesn't, and so he doesn't. I asked him, does your belief make things appear and disappear? If I believe that my laptop is not here, does that make my laptop disappear? No, my belief is wrong because it is there. My beliefs cannot change reality. My beliefs don't make things come in and out of existence. In the same way, my belief about Jesus doesn't change whether he is God or not. If he is God, anyone that says he's not is wrong. This is based on the law of non-contradiction. This isn't just a religious statement, but this is based on the laws of logic that are the foundation of all of our language. And our students often don't know these simple concepts that they'll learn in philosophy classes and that sort of thing that are the foundation that will help them say, well, hold on a second. Both of these religions, both of these statements, they both cannot be true at the same time in the same way. God can't exist and not exist at the same time. Jesus can't have risen from the dead and not have risen from the dead at the same time. Either you're right and I'm right, you're wrong, we're both wrong, and someone else is right. But we all can't be right at the same time. But our culture of religious pluralism wants to say that we do. Now this relativism is undermining the very core of Christianity, like I pointed out, right? In John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. How can Jesus be the truth if there is no truth? How can he be the way if there are multiple ways? He's not just a way. He's not just someone's life. Jesus here makes a statement saying, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except what? Through Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Joseph Smith? No. Only through the person of Jesus Christ. This is either true or it's not. And it doesn't depend on what I think about it or how much I believe. Right? But then someone's going to come to our students and say, well, but those other religious people, they believe it just as strongly as you do. Yeah, they do. They might believe it even more strongly than I do, their statements. But does how much I believe something change whether or not it's true? No. Just like I could believe so strongly I didn't have appendicitis, it doesn't change the fact of reality. The level of my belief doesn't change whether the belief is actually true or not. I want to show you guys an example of how this is playing out in our culture today when it comes to the topic of gender identity.
There's been a lot of talk about identity lately, but how far does it go? And is it possible to be wrong? We went to the University of Washington to find out. Are you aware of the debate happening in Washington State around the ability to access bathrooms, locker rooms, spas based on gender identity and gender expression?
I think people should be able to have access to the facility.
I think bathrooms could and potentially should be gender neutral because there doesn't need to be a classification for differences.
I think people definitely should have the ability to go to whichever locker room they want.
I feel like at least public universities should do their best to accommodate for those who do not have a specific
gender identity.
You know, whether you identify as a male or female and whether your sex at birth is matching to that, you should be able to utilize the resources.
So if I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you, okay, like, yeah.
Nice to meet you. By the way. Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I asked you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I'd say, good for you, like, yeah, be who you are. I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you suddenly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out my way until you know you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and you do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say, so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I was 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think if you truly believe you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong. No, but I say that I don't think that you are. I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, that's wrong to believe in it. Because I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
So I could be a Chinese woman.
Sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
If you thoroughly debate me or explain why you felt like you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
It shouldn't be hard to tell a 5'9" white guy that he's not a 6'5" Chinese woman. Clearly is. Why? What does that say about our culture? And what does that say about our ability to answer the questions that actually are difficult?
I like that. If you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. What were some of the, did anything in that video kind of stand out to you as like interesting, strange, weird, good, bad? All of it? Anything specifically? Yeah.
I think it was this idea, and I think it was one girl who was just like, do whatever, like whatever you feel, whatever you like, whatever makes you feel good, then sure, you can go ahead and say that. Kind of like regardless of her opinion didn't matter.
Yeah, our opinions don't matter. We should just be able to do whatever we feel like is good for us. As long as we're not what? Hindering society. As long as we're not hurting someone else, as long as we're not hindering society, then we can do whatever we want. Somebody else, I saw another hand. Something that stood out?
It's interesting where that one girl drew the line of you could be a Chinese woman but not 6'5".
Yeah.
That's
And she said, well, and what did he say? Why can't I be 6'5"?
because you're not.
You're not. Well, can we not say that about being a woman? Can we not say that about being Chinese? Where do we get this idea, and why is that line drawn there? That's awesome. Anything else stand out? Yes?
I thought it was kind of interesting that a lot of them were okay with him when that really happened. It would be like, oh, like, Richard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people would look at it that way. But then again, well, if you look at it as he's a creeper now, you're now judging him, now you're the wrong, you're the intolerant, you're the closed-minded person. Right? That's a lot how our culture's saying. Yeah?
It's just crazy how, like, there is everything about feelings, and your feelings constantly change, so you'll never know, ever.
Yeah. Everything's based on feelings. Our feelings are constantly changing. There's one thing that really stood out to me. Did you notice the person that said, it's not my place as a human to tell another human that they are what? They're wrong. Who am I to say that you're wrong? We're just two different human beings trying to figure this out. Right? This, again, is something that we see happening over and over at these college campuses. And in our culture, why can't we just tell someone, well, you're not this, you are this? Is it really intolerant? Why do we draw the lines where we do? It's very interesting to see if it's all just based on feelings. Well, I think a good thing for our students, here's what I heard at UC Berkeley last week all the time. As long as you don't hinder society, or as long as you don't hurt anyone. Well, what do you mean by hurt someone? Because is it just hurting someone physically? What about emotionally? What about spiritually? Can you hurt someone and not have them know that you hurt them? If they don't know that they've been hurt, then is what I did wrong? What if you're hurting yourself? When I presented these questions to a student at UC Berkeley last week, he just went, I've never thought about that. You know what's interesting is most of the students that we talked to had come from some religious background when they were young. Every student I talked to at UC Berkeley last week had grown up either Christian or Catholic and was now an agnostic or an atheist. And every single one said, and we even had atheists come and speak to our group, and they had grown up religious, and every single one said, when I got to college, that's when I realized it just wasn't for me. I didn't feel anything, it just wasn't for me, and I left. Every student I encountered at Berkeley said that. It just wasn't for me, it wasn't my truth. So they left when they got to college. Here's the thing, our students are going to be challenged by culture, whether we like it or not. The question is do we want to challenge them now when they are with us, or do we want to wait till they're thousands of miles away and they get challenged by their professors and they don't know where to go? Do we help challenge them now? That's what we're going to be looking at. Now you might think, well, our students don't think like this. Maybe these are some UC Berkeley students, these are some at the University of Washington. Our students aren't thinking like this. Well, actually they are. The Barna Research Group teamed up with Summit Ministries to do a study on what worldview do people actually hold to. And here's what they found. I want to show you some of the statistics. Overall, at least 61% of practicing Christians embrace at least one of the ideas rooted in new spirituality. This is kind of that voice training that I showed you. That was from a new spiritualist worldview. Here's some of the things. All people pray to the same God or spirit, no matter what name they use for that spiritual being. 28% of Christians. Now, I want you to notice one thing. There's the under 45 and the over 45. Notice how the under 45 percentage is always higher in every single one of these statistics. The younger Christians. Meaning and purpose come from becoming one with all that is. 38% of young Christians think that meaning and purpose is becoming one with all that there is. Or this idea of karma. If you do good, you receive good. If you do bad, you receive bad. 50% of young Christians hold to karma as their ethic. And I don't know how many students I talk to that say, well, this behavior doesn't affect me. It doesn't hurt anyone else, or I didn't receive bad things, therefore what I did was not bad. It didn't hurt me, it didn't hurt my relationship, therefore it's not a bad thing. I can go out and I can drink with my friends, and I don't get hurt, and so it's not a bad thing, because if it was bad to drink underage, then I would get hurt. If it's bad to sleep with my boyfriend or girlfriend before we get married, then it should have some negative consequence on me. I'm happy, and because I'm happy, therefore what I'm doing is a good thing. I don't know how many times I've heard students use this idea of karmic ethics to then justify the behaviors they want to do, rather than looking at the Christian view of things. If God has declared things good and bad in his very nature, these things are unchanging, and we have to discover what is right and wrong, not just what is right and wrong based on how it affects us. 50% of young people believe good and bad just based on karma. Here's another aspect. Secularism. 29% of practicing Christians believe at least one of the secular statements assessed in the project. Person's life is valuable only if society sees it as valuable. 28% of young Christians believe this. What is this idea? What implications are being played out with this idea? Abortion. The unborn is not valuable, therefore it's not helpful to society, therefore it's not valuable, and therefore we can kill it. Does value come from its usefulness in society? No. What other law was passed in California about a year ago? End of life, physician-assisted suicide, right? If If you're mentally disabled, if you are handicapped, if you are just ill, if you're terminally ill, right, your life kind of loses some value and you can choose to end your own life. If you're not helping society. We saw the same thing playing out, right, in Nazi Germany. These people are not valuable, therefore they're not human. Same thing with slavery. Does value come from only if society sees it as valuable? No. Our value comes from being created in the image of God. But here's 28% of young Christians believing this. Meaning and purpose come from working hard to earn as much as possible so you can make the most of life. 37% of young Christians. Meaning and purpose is just working hard. Is that where meaning and purpose come from? No. Here's the scary one. Here's postmodernism. 54% of practicing Christians embrace at least one of the postmodern statements. No one can know for certain what meaning and purpose there is to life. 32% of young Christians. What is morally right and wrong depends on what an individual believes. I think that's the scariest, 37%. If you believe something is good, it's good. If you believe it's bad, it's bad. Well, what do we do in cases like murder? What do we do in cases, of these terrible things that are happening? Is that really what we think, that morality is relative? If your beliefs offend someone or hurt their feelings, then who's wrong? You're the wrong one. So who am I to tell someone else that they're wrong? Because if I offend them, I'm wrong. Because we shouldn't offend anyone. 29% of young Christians. The gospel is offensive. The gospel tells us we are broken, we are sinners, and we can't fix ourselves. That's offensive. People don't want to hear that. So then do we just step back and say, fine, I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to tell anyone they have to accept Jesus or else they're going to hell. I don't know how many students come to me. It's like, well, are you really going to say that those people are going to be eternally judged? Well, that's what Scripture says. That's not just my belief. That's what Scripture says. That all have fallen short of the glory of God. That all have sinned, and we only come to salvation through the work of Jesus Christ. That's offensive. But it's also good news, right? Because it's a solution to our brokenness. But if our students have this way, this postmodern relativistic way of thinking, that if I offend someone, then I'm wrong, then how can Christianity be true? They're never going to get out there and say anything. It's just going to be true for them, their own personal truth. Here's the last one, Marxist ideas. 36% of practicing Christians held at least one aspect of Marxism in their worldview. That it's private property that encourages greed and envy, not the fact that we're broken, not the fact that we are selfish creatures, that we're sinful. The government should control as much of the resources as necessary rather than individuals. 30% of young people believing this. That everything would become better if the government just takes control of all things rather than individuals. So here are a couple things that I think help us see that our students and Christians are being influenced by culture. I don't know how many times I go to pastors and churches and youth leaders and I ask, are we talking about these things in church? And most of the time I hear, no, we're not. So my question is, if we're not talking about this, if we're not helping our students think clearly about it, then where are they learning it from? Our culture. Our culture is influencing them, sometimes in ways that we don't even recognize until we see the statistics. What Barna and Summit found out with this study is that only 17% of practicing Christians, and these were Christians that said that Christianity was important to them and went to church, only 17% actually held a Christian worldview. It gets lower when you then look at the younger Christians. Right? We don't actually have Christian worldviews. You can go find all this stuff at Barna's website, and actually you can take the worldview test and you can see how much of a Christian worldview you have. So, how then do we respond? How then do we come to our students and help them respond to this cultural relativism that is influencing them and changing them? Well, I want to show you another quick video that I think underlines and kind of emphasizes the point that we need to respond with both truth and compassion, with truth and grace, right? Jesus came in truth and grace. Watch this next short video.
There was recently a story about a 52-year-old father of 7 who now self-identifies as a 6-year-old girl. What do you think of that?
Man, I think it's interesting.
I've actually never heard of someone identifying as a different age.
I guess I shouldn't, judge, because everybody, has their own, identity and stuff.
it's liberated me. And I don't have to act my age. And by not acting my age, I don't have to deal with the reality that was my past. I don't have to think about adult stuff. I still drink coffee and drive a car, right? In my tractor, but I still drive the tractor as a little kid. I drive my car as a little kid.
Our culture is so unwilling to define boundaries, so afraid of being perceived as judgmental, that they won't even recognize simple traits like age, sex, or skin color as unchangeable. If I were to say, I feel black, does that make me black?
Not necessarily, it doesn't. I believe you just are where you are. I don't think you really become or be anything.
I don't think so, because that's a biological law. There should be a difference between mental state and biological appearance.
If a 65-pound woman came up to me and said, I'm fat, the kind, compassionate thing to do is to help her see herself in a way that conforms to reality. So is there any limit to what somebody can self-identify as?
If you can find the resources to be the thing you want to be, you can do that. We're not ready for that. We are just now becoming more aware of social issues in regards to how you identify.
If I identify as a 65-year-old, can I draw Social Security? If I say I feel like a Native American, do I qualify for Native scholarships? If I identify as a paraplegic, can I get one of those little handicap decals for my car? The real problem is that people don't want to deal with reality.
I was never allowed to be a little girl. So I'm filling that tank of little girl experiences. It's easy, it's innocent. It's like just play. Everything becomes a game. Everything I imagined couldn't happen is happening.
Truth is compassion. I think that is what we have to think about when we come to this culture. Right? I think this is a very good video, actually put out by a good friend of mine, Caleb Bonham. I went to high school with him. But I like what he said. If a 65-pound girl comes up to me and says, I'm fat, is the loving thing to do say, yes, yes, you are. Keep doing what you're doing. She's not hurting society. She's not hurting anybody else. Is that the loving thing? No. The compassionate and the loving thing to do is what? Right? Help her see herself that conforms to reality. No, you're not. Right? We have to help people and get help for some of these ways that they see herself that doesn't match reality. But I think another good thing and how to do is respond is to confront these issues, to challenge them. Like we mentioned before, why does the line get drawn here and not there? If I can identify as a different gender, and that's perfectly fine, what about as a different age? If I identify as 65, can I start drawing Social Security? What do you think most people are going to say? No. Well, then you can ask the question, well, then why not this and just this? Get them to think about the logical conclusion of what if I start identifying as something else? Here's what I think is scary, and I don't even know if this is happening yet. It might be somewhere, I don't know. But I think if we keep going the way that we do, it might be a possibility in the future. Right now, someone can identify as a different gender. They can go in and they can get surgery where then the doctor removes perfectly functioning organs, right, and body parts. Well, what if someone identifies as an amputee and walks into a hospital and says, I want you to chop my legs off? Are doctors going to do that? Are we going to start removing perfectly functioning limbs and other body parts? Well, why not? If I can identify as a woman and go get surgery, why can't I identify as an amputee and go get surgery? Right? I think these are questions that we have to help people start to think about and start to wonder. Because again, when I was at UC Berkeley last week, I don't know how many times I asked students very basic questions, and I got the response, I've never thought about that before. They haven't thought through these things. They're just allowing culture to influence them, and they're not stopping and actually thinking about what this will lead to. What are the implications of these decisions? So that's why I think when it comes to our students, what we need to do is stop isolating students and start inoculating them. Oftentimes, as parents, as youth leaders, we try and say, well, I just, hear no evil, speak no evil, don't see it, don't hear it. Just keep them isolated, keep them protected. The problem is that our culture and the world we're living in, we can't keep them protected anymore. I remember when I was graduating high school, I went to Christian school my whole life. I was graduating high school, going to public university, and so the local newspaper called me for an interview, saying, hey, can we interview you about someone who's grown up in a Christian school their whole life and now are going to public university? And they said, yeah. I said, sure, I'll be happy to do it. And they said, and they asked my dad, do you think that he's been isolated and he's kind of just been secluded from culture. And how do you think that's going to affect him? He goes, no, I don't think he has. Right? Because there's something different about our culture than before. I talked to my dad and I said, Dad, do you think that you kind of face the same things? He goes, no. Back when I was a kid, we grew up in a small town, small church. Everyone believed the same thing. There was no internet. There was these no things. You never got any of these outside messages. And yeah, you could grow up and never hear any opposing views. We don't live in that kind of culture today. It doesn't take long for our students to get on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Snapchat or something and just be bombarded with a worldview that's completely different than theirs. We can't isolate our students any longer. And the more we try to keep them in their own little bubble, at some point they're going to get hit with these objections to Christianity and they're going to say, why didn't you tell me these things? If my pastor didn't bring up these objections, he must have been scared of them. And so maybe they have some value to it. Maybe there's some weight. Instead, we need to inoculate students. We need to expose them. Back in the 1950s at Yale University, there's a study done on this inoculation theory. And what the professor thought about is, hey, when it comes to viruses, right, we understand that there are viruses in our culture, right, and we don't want people to get those, but if we just keep them in their own little bubble, they're susceptible. And so how do we do it, right? They discovered the idea of inoculation, right? You give them a little bit of it so that they become immune to it. And he said, well, if we can do this with viruses, what about ideas? Can we do the same thing with ideas? And so he did a study back in the 1950s where they presented a group of people with the idea, something like brushing your teeth is good for your health. And then brought a counter argument saying brushing your teeth is bad for you. And he prepared each group differently. Some groups he gave no preparation to see how they would respond to the false statement. Other groups, it was repetition. Brushing your teeth is good for you. 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 And then they presented the counter argument. Other groups, he warned them, you are about to be presented an argument that says brushing your teeth is bad for you. Just be prepared. Other groups, then they inoculated and then prepared. They did preparation. Now here's Jeff Myers from Summit Ministries kind of summarizing what they found in this study. And he says, for people to believe a claim, they must be prepared to defend it against its challengers. Merely repeating the message over and over again, even with increasing fervency, emotion, and clever staging, is actually counterproductive, worse than no preparation at all. Here's what the study at Yale University discovered, that purely repetition is actually counterproductive. It did not help the people defend against the counterpoints. But I think this, again, is what we do a lot of times. Don't go drink, 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 don't go drink. I don't know how many people I went to high school with that went off, as soon as they graduated, went off and drank, right? They just started the party scene as soon as they got into college. This repetition of the ideas and how many summer camps and everything we went to, they said, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink. It just kind of gets thrown out the window. Our students I just was talking to a student a few weeks back, and he was telling me about this event that he went to. I said, how was it? He said, oh, it was good. We just learned the list of don'ts. And it's like, that's all that we're giving. Just don't do this. If you want to have a successful life, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, everything will be good. Just a list of don'ts. Well, how should we respond? I think this is how we should respond. The antidote to indoctrination is to tell the truth. There's point one, tell the truth. Expose people to the lies that would deceive them, show them how to refute those lies, and prepare them with thinking skills necessary to continue resisting falsehoods. I think this is the solution for us as we are trying to raise a generation of students that we deeply love and care about to stay firm in their faith through our culture and through all this opposition. We have to tell them the truth of Christianity. We have to make sure that they understand Christianity. But then we have inoculation where we expose them to false ideas. Then we show them how to refute them, what's wrong with these ideas, and then give them the thinking skills necessary to continue doing that even when they're out of our care. One of the talks that I do is called an atheist role play, where I show up to a group and I role play an atheist. Sometimes they know I'm a Christian and I just am role playing. Other times the pastor introduces me as his atheist friend. The students have no idea. The first time I ever did it, I normally spend 5 or so minutes giving reasons why I think Christianity is false and why I'm no longer a Christian. My backstory is I grew up a Christian. I'm not a Christian anymore. And here's why. I then have about 30 minutes of Q&A where the students just ask me questions. And I respond, and I can normally respond and shoot down all of their objections. And then afterwards, I reveal that I'm a Christian, and I help them I help work through some of the objections that I brought up. What were the things that really bothered you? And let's look at how to respond to that. First time I ever did it, I finished. And I was unaware of this, but a few of the girls were in tears. Because in 30 minutes, I had shaken their faith so much, something that their parents had built 14 years into them. I had shooken it to the point of tears in 30 minutes. They'd never been exposed to this stuff before. Now, I've continued working with that group, and these students are passionate to understand these questions. Some of the guys in that group were angry and upset with me because they didn't know how to respond, and they were just like, oh, they're so upset. I finally revealed that I'm a Christian. They looked at their pastor and said, we need to know this stuff. And he goes, why do you think we're doing this? Right? And they recognize we don't know how to respond to these issues. Again, they're going to be presented these counter arguments. Do we present them when they're under our care, where we can show them how to refute the ideas and then give them the thinking skills like the law of non-contradiction, like the law of identity, like the laws of logic and logical fallacies to help them refute these as they continue to move forward? Or do we try and isolate them, protect them, where then they're going to get exposed to this when they go off to the university? I think the best thing to do is inoculate them and give them this while they're with us. The team that we took up to UC Berkeley last week, group of students, by the end of the week, we brought in intelligent atheists that are part of the San Francisco Atheist Club. We brought in to speak to our students. These are 14, 15-year-old high schoolers. We had like freshman girls. And they're able to sit there and defend Christianity and ask good questions to these people that are part of San Francisco Atheist Clubs. They're able to go to UC Berkeley and talk with college students and discuss evolution and these points. Because we had presented it to them, we showed them why it's false. Afterwards, we debriefed with them, and they're like, wow, that totally no, did you notice how he said that? That didn't line up with this. And we're like, exactly. Right? This is something that will then keep them solid in their faith when they go up to the university. So let me give you a couple of resources. We got 1 minute left. This coming fall, did I skip over it? There it is. This coming fall is the Rethink Student Apologetics Conference. I've got the shirt. I'm here speaking with Stand to Reason. Stand to Reason puts on this conference every year. It's going to be in Costa Mesa in September. Last year, 1,800 people were in attendance, mostly students at this conference. And it's geared to helping students understand Christianity. Last year was all about who is Jesus. Helping get past the cliches of just, Jesus died for my sins, and that's all I really know. But really understanding the truth of Christianity, who Jesus is, and then, presenting some counterpoints and helping them work through things like abortion and all that kind of stuff. And so here's a great resource if you're located here in California for you guys. Another one really quickly is the Apologetic Study Bible for Students. This just came out, the new revised edition this year. This has over 130 commonly asked questions and responses to them. I had the chance of writing one on why does God send good people to hell? This is a great resource with twisted scriptures, with archaeological evidence for our students to look at. And then lastly, you can always stay connected with me through my website. I do podcasts, I write blogs, and just as a resource to give our students to help them understand what is the truth of Christianity, but then when they are presented arguments, when objections that they don't know how to respond to, where can we go to learn the answers? And so hopefully with this, we can help grow up a generation of young Christians that don't just walk away from their faith. You know, what we're seeing today, 60 to 80% of Christian high schoolers are leaving Christianity when they get in college. Let's change that. Let's change that and help 68% stay in Christianity and stay strong in their faith rather than leaving when they get to college. Thank you guys. I think you're off to breakfast, right? So hopefully that'll help you wake up, get some coffee. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. I'll be back at 3:30 this afternoon doing an Ask Me Anything Q&A, but I'd love to talk to you guys. So have a good day. Thank you so much.